Typically, there will be 5 peak performance questions or 5 behavioral questions for each of these peak performance. Supply chain could be, again, tell me a situation where there is a plant and plant shut down and that was the only sourcing plant in that region. What would you do? Jamil, I'll give one tip to your audience, and this is $1 million tip. And this tip might even break the internet, this video, just because of this tip. So let me share it with you. P&G's first question would be tell me about yourself. So you need to prepare that. Make sure you do not say something which compromises morals, ethics, values, especially values related to P&G.
Hello and welcome to another podcast on my channel. And almost about a month ago, I posted this poll that you see in front of your screen right now, which is which supply chain job interview question and answers are you most interested in? And I posted like about 4 options. One was Amazon supply chain jobs, P&G supply chain jobs. Then I also posted a couple of options around some generic warehouse manager jobs and customer service representative jobs. And honestly, nobody voted for the generic options. There was a lot of interest for both Amazon and P&G supply chain job interviews. So today's podcast will be all about P&G supply chain job interview questions and answers. And when I think of the P&G hiring process, I cannot think of a better name than my guest today, who is Bahroz Abbas, because he has not only worked at P&G on very senior management positions, but he has recently made a lot of content on his own YouTube channel as well around these P&G interview hacks and interview preparation tips and so on. In fact, I will also put a link of his channel in my description here, and I strongly recommend that you go and subscribe to his channel as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my friend Bahroz Abbas. Hello, Bahroz, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jamil. Thank you. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks for the great work that you're doing on your channel. It's just amazing. I learn a lot from you. I share a lot of your videos as well across people who reach out to me with regards to primarily supply chain interviews, supply chain careers, and all. So thank you for what you're doing, and keep doing more of that.
Thanks a lot, Behrouz. So Behrouz, before we dive into the P&G interview process, I know you came on my channel before as well, and at that time we made a video about how to become a CFO. So it was a very different topic. But just for my supply chain audience out there, can you just give a quick summary of your career? How did you start at P&G, and what are you doing right now?
Yeah, so Jamil, I started my career with Procter& Gamble almost call it 18 years ago. I started in Pakistan, in Karachi. I did 5 years in Karachi in finance, then in Middle East primarily, and then moved back to Pakistan as a CFO for P&G Pakistan business. I've been trained twice by P&G to become to interview people for P&G. So I'm a trained interviewer, and I've also gotten some good accolades and awards during my time when I was conducting those interviews as well, in terms of being one of the best recruiters in the company and all. So I've had a lot of knowledge with regards to recruitment and interview conducting and interview taking. Plus, my experience with Procter& Gamble altogether helps me be a good resource in order for me to kind of share this knowledge that I share on my channel.
Awesome. So let's just dive into it, Behrouz. And I know, like, I worked for P&G many years ago as well in supply chain. When I also look at their interviewing process today, it has not changed a lot. It's the same 4-step process, which starts with application, assessment, interviews, and offer. So can you just start by giving the audience a little bit of an overview of the process, and then we can dive into it one by one?
The first thing that they are trying to do is they're trying to shortlist the best candidate, because they don't want to go and interview 100 applications, right? So there's a job opportunity that comes in, and there are 100 people, let's say, that apply for that particular opportunity. They cannot just take 100 people through the process. So how do they do the shortlisting? Number one is an assessment test. It's an online assessment test. It's a 4-part assessment test. The first part is called the peak assessment, which is them trying to measure whether you're the best cultural fit or not. It will primarily have multiple questions and questions on a scale, likely, most likely, less likely, those kind of questions. Again, I've made a couple of videos on that, so it kind of where I explain exactly how you can go about acing it. But essentially, what you need to do is you need to understand their culture, and we can talk more about that piece. Second is a digit challenge, which is more cognitive ability, whether you can do plus minus a few numbers, multiplication here and there. You know it best as well, irrespective of the function in P&G, whether you're finance, marketing, sales. It's a number game in P&G. There is everything starts with the numbers and ends with numbers as well. So that piece is important. And this third one is a switch challenge, which is also a cognitive assessment where you have to figure out how different numbers, how the positions of different numbers are changing, and it will give you a position of particular set of numbers and how it is changing. You kind of have to predict that. And the last one is a grid challenge, which is again a cognitive test as well, where you kind of need to predict symmetry between two figures, and there is some memory game in it as well. All these three tests, like the digit, the switch, and the grid, are 6 minute long, and you can give it in different parts. Like you can give one test and rest for a day because you just got tired. 6 minute test was maybe was a lot for you. Then you can give the next and the next day, the next day. So you can break these four tests in parts. This way, they will be able to shortlist. Let's say the 100 applications go down to, I don't know, let's say 25. And then what they will do is they will pick up those resumes and they will read through the resumes and see if you are the right fit or not, which is slightly strange. Like, because a lot of companies, they first shortlist the resumes and then offer you to go through the test. They will do the shortlisting of the resumes later, which is where they will see, okay, are you the right fit or for the role or not, and should you be taken through the rest of the process or not. If you clear the test, which means you can apply for any other job at Procter& and Gamble for another 12 months because those test results are valid. Simultaneously or similarly, if you fail the test, then for another 12 months, you're not allowed to apply to any other role because they think that you will need 12 months for you to get better cognitively and culturally to be the right fit for Procter& and Gamble. You cannot just give the test, fail once, and then give it again tomorrow and say, oh, I cleared and now I'm the right fit. No, they don't believe in that. So you have to wait till 12 months. And if you cleared the test, they don't shortlist your resume, then you can apply for another role where you might be better suited. But if they shortlist your resume, let's say out of 25 resumes, they call it 8 resumes, then you go through an interview process. Typically, the interview process would have, there will be 3 interviews, or it could be 4 as well. The first interview could be just a recruiter calling you and just trying to have an introductory call. And then there are 3 serious interviews, which would be 1 hour long. The idea is not to have actually 3 interviews. The idea is 3 different people to assess you. And because they want to make sure that there are 3 different people who have within the company who have seen you from all angles, and they pass a judgment collectively. It's not like one person deciding, it's not the hiring manager deciding. And then after those 4 interviews or 3 interviews, there might be another interview with, could be the hiring manager if he's not interviewed or she's not interviewed you already, or could be some superior who just wants to have a chit chat kind of a session with you. It would be more of a know you better interview versus a full-fledged proper P&G interview. So anyways, I just wanted to give you a highlight of how the process works. So you apply, then you go through the test, you get shortlisted your resume, then you go through the interview, and if you clear everything, you clear. And I just want to call out one more thing, that this what I just shared with you is not just applicable for finance role because I come from finance, not just applicable to supply as you come from supply, but applicable to every other role in the company. One caveat. Recently, which wasn't the case by the way, Jamil, in times when you and I were in P&G, but they've also introduced a technical interview, which may not be for everyone, by the way. It might be for someone who is a digital marketeer or an engineer, and they want to make sure that they also are technically sound. I think it should be valid for finance as well, but they don't have a technical interview for finance. But there are certain roles where they would be having a technical interview and they will call it out. They will say this is a technical interview. So you'll have to prepare for that particular interview slightly differently, and it will be a technical interview which will be different from those 3 interviews. So this is an added interview which you might have.
That's a very interesting development, Bahroz. Is this because, I mean, maybe one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, does P&G still believe in the promote from within culture, or have they digressed from that? Because I remember back in the day, and I know like I worked for P&G many, many years ago. So I'm a little bit of my memory is a bit rusty there. But the process used to be very similar for all the functions because everybody used to get hired at the same level. There was no concept of hiring from outside. You will never see like a supply chain director or a plant manager coming in from another company at P&G. That never happens, right? Everybody kind of gets promoted from within. So it's almost like a school, right? Everybody goes through the same elementary curriculum and then they go into their specific functions. But do you know, of late, have they deviated from that philosophy of promoting from within?
So, Jamil, yes and no. Yes is because, or rather, let me start with no. So, if there is a role for which there is talent and pool or talent pool available already in the company, they won't go and hire externally for it. And now, again, we are not talking entry level anymore. We are talking lateral. So, for a lateral move, if there is a candidate who's already ready or who's being worked on, which was the case with us as well, which was the beauty of Procter& and Gamble, and this is what I tell people as well, and maybe slightly I'm diverging, but I'll come back to your question, that as a manager, I would work 50% of the time to develop myself. But the balance of the 50% of that time which I'm left, I need to work on the people who are under me, because I need to make sure that there's someone ready to take my place before I can get promoted. I cannot go to my boss and say, promote me, if there is no one who's ready to take my place. So this is something which I tell even in the company where I'm working now as well. Tell those stories as well, that here there is no stress for you to really invest in me, because to my manager, let's say, because if you don't find me the best, like the guy who has everything, you can just go and source someone externally. But in P&G, you don't have a choice. You really have to work on me. And that is important because you will not get promoted if I'm not ready to take your place, or someone else in the team is not ready to take your place, which used to be amazing. They've slightly diverged from it, and that's why I said yes and no. And I think for the right reasons, at least from business standpoint, because there are a lot of roles where it is very hard to find talent within the company, because the company is very much designed, you know it as well, in a particular format. They train everyone in one way. It's like everyone the factory produces everyone in one particular way, and we think alike, we talk alike, everything, which kills the diversity altogether. And hence, it is important that for some roles where P&G has not high focus, let's take tax as an example in finance. In finance, P&G has high focus on developing leaders and financial analysis and people who will go become communicators and be more business managers than finance managers. But at the end of the day, you need accountants as well. You need tax managers as well. You need some legal experts as well. But P&G doesn't focus on people to become legal experts. They focus on people to become leaders. So in order to fill that gap where P&G is not focusing on not training, is not the training ground, you need to hire people who are the experts and may not be at entry level. And that is why there are a lot of people that I've started to coach for P&G interviews who are coming laterally, and they might, and for them there is bigger chance of having that technical interview to be taken place.
Got it. Yeah. And I learned the pros and cons of this promote from within culture when I left P&G, actually, because I was a big fan of this when I used to work, because that was the only way of doing business I had learned, because that was my first company, right? But when I moved to my current organization, and that was also quite a while back, of course, I went through a number of cultural changes and all of that. But in today's time and age, when technology is changing so fast, and once again, I'll just keep the supply chain context in mind, you want people who have worked in different environments, because you may not be working on the best planning software, you may not be working on the best ERP system, you may not be working on a lot of other things which, your company may not be kind of on the leading edge all the time. So it's, while yes, there is a little bit of a trade-off which you already covered, where there is no vested interest in the line manager to develop their subordinates, because you can go and hire from outside, but at the same time, the talent you are bringing from outside, sometimes, and more often than not in today's time and age, you need that diversity, not just the diversity from a gender perspective, but also from a knowledge perspective, from an experience perspective, and so on. So thanks for sharing that, because yeah, that's something which I'm always intrigued, because every company is different. And I know at one point in time, P&G and General Electric were the only two companies who used to have this promote from within philosophy. But now I know they are also changing with the changing times. So thanks for giving the overview of the process, Perros. Now, as we get into the interviewing process, and of course, I cover lot of these questions, and in most of my videos, I've covered the STAR model in a lot of detail, so we don't have to cover that on this podcast. But I think uh, as far as the nature of the questions, whether it's supply chain or finance, in that interview are pretty similar, because at the end of the day, you're looking for problem solvers, you're looking for critical thinkers, you're looking for leaders, like how do you work with teams. So can you give my audience some examples of behavioral questions that are very, very common in P&G job interviews?
Correct. Thank you for asking that. So the beauty about P&G interview is that it is a very structured process. Rather, so much so that there are certain interviewers who follow the prescription that is given to them to T, which is they have a guide which even has questions called out. You rightly said the same questions apply across functions, so it's not function specific. However, there is one thing that they've done additional or recently, which is a way for them to kind of judge or differentiate between functions as well, and I'll explain that part. But to answer your question, there are two parts. One is behavioral and one is situational, and the situational part is what has gotten added. Previously we didn't have situational questions, it would just be behavioral questions. Under behavioral questions, you will be asked questions around the five peak performance factors. One is leadership, so there will be a leadership question. The leadership questions would be in the tune of, tell me a time when you took a difficult decision, tell me a time when you jumped into a team or a situation and you led the project and worked through it. So again, your leadership examples. The second one is around ideation. So tell me about a time when you came up with a new idea. So do you have innovation mindset or not? And here I must say P&G is very much into come up with new ideas, but also replicate old ideas. If there is an idea which is working, just copy paste it. The third is around productivity. Fourth one is around excellence, which is more about how do you perform in pressure? How do you prioritize when you have a deadline? How do you manage that? And the last one, which wasn't there at least in the time when you were there in P&G and they've added, is bring out your best, which is kind of summation of everything, which is just being giving your best. Like you are in a situation, a tough situation, how do you handle it? So you will be asked questions around these, and typically there will be five peak performance questions or five behavioral questions for each of these peak performance. Now, the second part is a situational interview or situational questions that you will be asked. Situational questions are very much different from behavioral questions because in behavioral question, you are asked to tell me about a time that happened in history. In situational question, you are given a situation in future. Let's say you are in a team and your team disagrees with the idea that you are coming up with. You know that the idea that the team is suggesting will cost the company a lot of money. What will you do? Now, when you answer this question, there is no car or star because the context is already given to you. So, all you need to do is you need to just talk about the action, and even the result is meaningless because it is something in the future. So, you need to talk about the action altogether. Now, this is where at times the interviewer might want to play a different card for different candidates. So, for finance, they may go like, tell me about what if you are in a situation where the fixed cost in a particular factory is very high? How will you go about reducing the fixed cost? Supply chain could be, again, tell me a situation where there is a plant and plant shut down and that was the only sourcing plant in that region. What would you do? Something on those lines. And they'll give you a situation. Under situation, there are typically three kind of situation you'll get. One is a business situation, like I mentioned, plant shut down or plant fixed cost, sales went down, you're losing share, you promised distributors the volume and the supply cannot provide it. What will you do? The second would be around prioritization or task. So let's say you are in a situation where there are three deadlines which are approaching, and suddenly you're given another project by your manager. What will you do? And the third is around influencing conflict management, which I gave an example like team members don't agree with you, their idea is not the best of the idea. How would you manage? Your manager is going with an idea you disagree with because it will cost the company a lot of money. How do you push back? How do you argue that? So typically they will be in these three areas. And again, it depends. So I would say if it's an HR interview, probably it would be less focused on the business question, might be more on prioritization and influencing and all. For finance, I would say it would be more P&L related situational question and maybe influencing. For supply chain, it would be more supply related. If there is supply blockage situation, how would you handle it? So this is kind of the interview format, and these are kind of the sample questions you can expect.
So just a question on that, Behroz, because I actually my first encounter with situational question was when I was applying for Mars, where I work now, and the way they manage these situational questions is that they will give you a case study. So does P&G also has case studies? Because say, case study is a classical example of those situational questions, right? Because they will give you a scenario, a lot of numbers, and I want to talk a little bit about that later as we go. But do they have case studies in P&G interviews?
No, not at all. But what will happen is, as part of the situational question, they keep making it very difficult for you. So, for instance, if you come up with an idea, you say the sales have dropped by 30%, and what will you? And you have a supply that you produce because you thought that you will be able to sell it. What will you do? So, for instance, you say, I will check with my finance manager and see if we can discount it, and if there is margin to discount it, I will sell it on a discount. No, you cannot sell it on a discount. What will you do now? Then you come up with an answer and they'll say, no, no, that is not possible. And that is not possible. And for this particular part, what I say is don't put all your cards on the table. So let's say if you have three ideas, share with them two ideas. I will discount it and I don't try to sell it in some other market. And then they say both of these are not possible. And then you come up with the third one. And if they say that's not possible, so don't give all your cards in one go. But to answer your question, no, there is no case study per se. It is a situational question, but the situational questions becomes a discussion, more of a discussion versus you're given a case and you just present.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think one more point I would like to add with these situational questions is that a lot of times people get too stressed out about the numbers and the calculations going on in their head. And I think you nailed it, Barrows, earlier, and I really want to kind of double down on that point that the result doesn't matter, the thought process does. So what the recruiter, what the interviewer is trying to gauge by putting you through this whole exercise is they want to look at your thought process and how do you perform in pressure, how do you perform when you've got multiple variables to look at. So you don't get stressed out about giving the wrong answer, but at the critical thing is that you need to show and you need to demonstrate your ability to come up with ideas and try to show the interviewer your thought process, because that's what they are really interested in. Because at the end of the day, they are not going to make the decision based whether you got the answer right or wrong, but they will make the decision on how you performed throughout that exercise.
Okay.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, completely agree. And Jamil, I'll give one tip to your audience, and this is $1 million tip. And this tip might even break the internet, this video, just because of this tip. So let me share it with you. And this is for situational questions. You can cheat in this situational question, especially if it's an online interview. And let me tell you how. There are typically, as I said, three, four, five types of situational questions or case study that you can be asked. The answer is always the same. Whenever there is a conflict, how do you manage a conflict? You sit down with the person, you understand where they're coming from, you tell them where are you coming from, you tell them you understand what is their agenda, you tell them what your agenda is, you tell them what the strategy of the organization is so you can hit the strategy, and you get expert opinion, you make use of data. It's standard. It's the standard way of doing. Whenever there is a business situation, what will you do? You get all the information, you make use of data, you study what is the impact, you make scenarios. Out of the scenarios, you do risk assessment, and then you put the three, four scenarios in front of the management, and you propose the one that you think is the best. You get expert opinion, data, and also there are typically few kind of situation questions or cases that you will get, and they have kind of standard answers to them. Have them written in front of you. So this is what I do. When I'm asked a situational question, I go like, give me some time to think about it. So what it does is it kind of tells the interviewer that you're thoughtful. Like you won't just say anything that comes to your mind because you are not asking me what happened in my past. If you ask me about my past, it's in my memory. I prepared for it. But if you give me a situation or a case or something that will happen in the future, I'm not prepared for it. So give me 30 seconds. And then I look down and I have the answers written in front of me. All I will do is I will mark the three, four, 5 points which I think are relevant for it, like data, use of data, get expert opinion. I'll mark them and then I'll look up and I'll go one by one. Number one, I will make use of data. Number two, I will get expert opinion. And if you forget something, you have the permission to look down because you already pretended as if you were taking notes. So they think you are taking notes, although you were not taking notes. You already have the notes written in front of you. You can look down, see which point is relevant, And if you've forgotten, you can just put your head up and answer that particular point or say that particular point. Now, of course, you'll still have to do a good delivery. But I always say that the interview is not a place where you use your brain power to memorize things. Interview is a place where you use your brain power to process things. So anything that you have to memorize should be written in front of you. Frankly speaking, I've even taken my notes in a physical interview, let alone a virtual interview. In a physical interview, I've taken my notes as well. It's perfectly fine to do that. And if you don't have your notes, at least take a blank piece of paper and still give it a thought before you answer. When they give you a situation, say, let me think about it. Or let me structure my thoughts. Give me some time to structure my thoughts. Look down, take notes, and then deliver.
Awesome. That's definitely $1 million tip, Bahroz. And I think if somebody from the P&G recruitment team is watching this podcast, they will definitely have to come up with some new ideas on how they can go around this trick, right? But thanks a lot for sharing it. In fact, it's a great segue into my next question, Bahroz, is I think we have covered the assessment and the interviewing process in a lot of detail. So that's great. Any quick tips you want to give to the audience on like what are the top few do's and don'ts when it comes to P&G interviews?
So, a couple of things. One is P&G is a very relationship kind driven company. People who are there, they feel part of a family, they feel part of a cult, for lack of better words, or maybe in a different way. So, it is very important for them to know that they're hiring someone who's a good fit. They don't want someone who's the expert. Like P&G, it's a bad example, but let me give it. P&G won't hire someone as intelligent as Elon Musk because they know they if he's an intelligent guy, but he won't be the right fit in the culture. And they rather hire someone with the lower IQ, lesser IQ, than the highest IQ in the world available, but who is a better fit because they need a brick who can fit in the wall versus someone who is an expert but cannot just fit in the wall. So I always say that in your introduction, give a personal touch. What I do is I talk about my family. I have kids. I joke around my son being naughty, my daughter being sweetheart. I talk about my marriage. I got married, wedding crashing. That's where I met my wife. It doesn't have to be a 2 minute thing. Like you just have to do it in 30 seconds, but give a flavor of yourself. Like I love volleyball. I in my free time I read books. I play squash. Something, or I have a pet, or something on those lines. And especially if there is something that you can use to relate with the interviewer, it would be very good to develop that relationship. I think it works on in other interviews as well normally, but there are certain places where it is very strict, like be very professional, be very to the point versus just trying to tell all about yourself. But in P&G, it would be nice if you take 30 seconds to talk about your personal life. This is one. Second is P&G's first question would be tell me about yourself. So you need to prepare that. Typically, every interview has that particular question as the first question. But for P&G, 100%, they will ask you, tell me about yourself first. So make sure you have a good script ready. The second question that will come for sure will be a leadership question. So imagine if you know exactly the two questions that you will be asked and you can prepare the answer to those questions word by word. And this is like 15 minutes of your interview. If you ace your first 15 minutes of the interview, the rest of the interview is a breeze. So the first question they will ask you, tell me about yourself. The second question they will ask you exactly, I won't be able to give you the question, but it would be, tell me about a time you led something. Tell me about a time when you were a leader. Tell me about a time you. So anything to do with your leadership. So forget the question that they will ask you. Think about your leadership example. As soon as they go and throw a leadership question at you, tailor your example to fit in the question and just say your example altogether. If you have these two questions prepared, your first 15 minutes are rocking, and then rest of the interview becomes very easy. The third piece, or maybe it's a don't, because I mentioned the two do's. The don't is make sure you do not say something which compromises morals, ethics, values, especially values related to P&G. P&G will take you through 3 interviews. This is a normal process. But if you don't hear after the first interview, there's a good chance you said something which was against their values. So even if you're bad in the interview, they will still take you through the 3 interview process. But the moment you say something which is not ethical from P&G standpoint, like I read through something, maybe you give an example where you say, I got access to one of the competition's ideas and I used it to build my own idea, or I got inspired by it, even if it doesn't mean that you were cheating it. I got inspired by an idea which was in public, something like that. And you're trying to sell yourself as someone who's very smart, like something that was not available to public. You got your hands on it, and you're so smart that you were able to inspire yourself with that, and came gone. Your interview is done there and then. Typically, they would even just close the interview there and then. They won't even take you for the full hour, let alone taking you through the entire process. So you rather stay away from any such example where you may be compromising the values with Procter& and Gamble. Yeah, so these are kind of the do's and don'ts I would call out.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks a lot for that, Barrows. And my last and final question, which I always ask to anyone super experienced like yourself who comes on my show, is what is one advice you would like to give to your 25-year-old self?
That's an amazing question, Jamil. So we'll stay in the context of Procter& and Gamble. I would say I would tell myself not to be limited in terms of opportunities and career. And the reason I say this is because P&G is a company. When you get in, it is very difficult to get out because it's a cult. You think that you are in a place which is superior to everything else around you, and it is very difficult for you to value anything that is outside. Only when you leave. And typically people who leave, it's not an easy decision for them to leave. I'm sure it was the same for you, and was the same for me as well. So my advice would be, every 2 to 3 years, if you don't see yourself getting a new challenge and growing and developing, just move out or move on the side or move anywhere else. And I don't mean just the ranks. I was able to rise the ranks very quickly. But one thing that I missed was I was not able to get the breadth of experience. Like, I'm very much limited in terms of financial analysis, FP&A. I wish I had given more. I had taken opportunities in tax, in plant finance, in supply. I did supply finance as well, but more of that, which I didn't do because I came into my comfort zone very quickly, and because it was the comfort of P&G, I just stayed there, and I was growing as well with the company, so I was like, this is good. But when I came out of P&G, I realized that they kind of spoilt me, and I wish I because when I go on into interviews, they go like, okay, financial analysis, this, but that's not just finance. Finance has other many things as well. So it took me some time to understand and get that knowledge, which I had to get the hard way later, because when you're young, it's easy to go and take multiple experiences. As you get older, it becomes more difficult to go on the sides and take those experiences. So in summary, I would advise people to take as many challenges as possible, leave their comfort zone, because it is easy to make those mistakes. I can't make mistakes at this level, at this age. I could have done that when I was younger.
Yeah, and maybe just to add the supply chain context to this, Behrouz, and thanks for sharing this fantastic advice. Same thing applies in supply chain, right? So supply chain is a very broad field because if you think about supply chain, there is manufacturing, there is engineering, there is planning, there is logistics, there is now supply chain IT, which is becoming a pretty strong pillar of supply chain jobs itself. And one advice I always give to young professionals is try to diversify your skills as much as you can because it's a massive industry and you will grow further by building that experience. And one area, in fact, I should also mention is procurement. In fact, one of my previous guests did mention that that procurement is such a blind spot in supply chain jobs because nobody kind of wants to go there. But if you think about it, procurement is the place where all the money is spent. You have got the power to spend the money with the suppliers, with the contractors, and so on. And the amount of learnings you get in negotiation and all of that. I personally wish one of my regrets is that I should have probably spent more time in that part of supply chain because I've kind of spend a lot of time in logistics planning and customer service and all of those kind of things. But supply chain is much beyond that, just like Barrows mentioned about finance. So I think if you are young, first of all, try to spend a lot of time in operational jobs. Try to get your hands dirty as early as you can. Your laptop, your office space is not going anywhere. So the more time you can spend in a warehouse, in a factory, at a port, trying to clear containers and understanding how the customs work in certain countries, which may be a very painful experience, but it's a very valuable experience which can really help you further down your career. So with that said, I think Bahroz, we will end the podcast here. Thanks a lot once again for your time and for the fantastic advice. I think we should be doing this more often, and maybe we can take another session where we can go deeper into some of the questions that you covered. But I think for now this is fantastic. So thanks a lot for coming. Any last words from your end before we close?
No, Jamil, thanks a lot. And the last word would be I think I would need to invite you as well. And maybe we can talk about supply chain interviews, because I see you becoming more and more of an expert in that area. And as I said, I kind of refer a lot of people who reach out to me, especially if they have supply background, they need help with jobs, interviewing, and also I pass it on to you. So it would be nice to do kind of something similar that we are doing here on my channel as well. Thank you for this.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Bahroz. Take care.
Thank you.